Right, so we're thinking about these verses in Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, and we've got them there. And the title today is, what on earth is Jesus telling us? What on earth is Jesus preaching? Because this is, in theory, this is supposed to be a really famous sermon. I'm going to suggest it's some of the most well-known and most misunderstood and certainly least obeyed teaching that Jesus ever taught. Lots of people have heard bits of it, but I reckon loads of people misunderstand it and fewer actually obey it. So what on earth is he saying? And I've got a quote there from My Fair Lady. When one of the suitors is coming to sort of woo Eliza near the end, and he starts singing this kind of soppy love song, and she kicks off, words, 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 all I hear is words, and she says, don't talk of this, don't talk of that. If you're on fire, don't talk about desire. If you're on fire, show me. And it's all about words versus actions. And I think that's very interesting. Lots of people today don't ask, is Christianity true? I think a lot of them think, does Christianity work? How relevant is it for me? Is it going to make a difference in my life? And I think that's the challenge for this sermon. Does it work? Is it relevant? Show me. Okay? And Jesus is going to preach something in this sermon that works. Does it work? Yeah, and it's going to show us, I think, things. And I think the other thing is that culture today is obsessed with lifestyle. So there's shows about clothes, homes, holidays. You can watch people online, influencers, how to live, how to love, how to do your makeup. Even, I would say, even Ebbsfleet Development Corporation is basically selling a lifestyle. They're selling a dream. They're selling a kind of healthy, happy place. I think they're selling a lie, but they're selling a dream. And it's all about on the surface, and there is a kind of rebellion against that. People want genuineness, don't they? People want sincerity. They want integrity. They want meaningfulness. They want to be real. That's the way. I want to be real with you, as if somehow we're not. And I'm going to say that again, Jesus is going to exactly be real. He's going to go under the surface. This is real counterculture that we're going to be thinking about in the Sermon on the Mount, right? So Jesus' words should hit us deeply. I think we're going to find, as we look at this study, that in some ways it's scary because Jesus just peels back the layers, the kind of veneer that we put on things, the religious kind of respectable veneer that we put on our lives, and he goes down into the heart. And he kind of roots around inside our thoughts and our motives and our emotions. And I think that's really what's quite scary. But of course it's honest and it's powerful because it's going to change us. So just today, a little very brief overview of what on earth is Jesus saying in the Sermon on the Mount. And I've got a couple of questions. I think I've got 4 questions, haven't I? Yeah. 4 questions. So the first, they're hopefully very simple, but there's a lot to them. So the first question is, who's speaking? Well, you could say, yeah, it's Jesus, of course, duh. I mean, it's there right in black and white. But what do we know about him? And if you look at the verses there, what do we know about him? Well, here's a list of things. He's a preacher, because he's preaching. He's a healer, because he's been healing. And he's got power. But is that enough to listen to him? I mean, lots of people claim to have power. Lots of people claim to be able to do things. Is that enough? Well, he's very popular, isn't he? The next verse, his fame spread. The crowds were following him. Crowds of people. He was drawing a crowd before any social media. Well, is that enough? If you've got 10,000 followers, does that mean that we should listen to you? And then we're told he goes up a mountain. or probably more likely he went up into the hill country. But it's this reference to a mountain. That's really deliberate, because Matthew is going to be telling us about the other great teacher that Israel had, Moses, how he went up the mountain and he received God's law and God's commands, and then he told the people. And I think that Matthew is deliberately mentioning that because he's saying there's a new teacher with law from God, with revelation from God. Just like Moses was the big cheese in the Old Testament, now this Jesus is coming and he's telling us something that's going to have the same authority as Moses. Is that enough? And he sits down. That's important. That's what the teachers did. That's what the rabbis did. So Jesus is deliberately setting himself up and saying, I am a rabbi, I am a teacher, I need you to follow. And it's not in the NIV, in the translation we've got, but that's why I've printed this out from the English Standard Version, which is a bit more word for word, literal. It says, he opened his mouth and taught them. And again, that's just a deliberate, that's a Bible phrase that means something important is happening. When someone opens their mouth, it's like we've got to focus in on their mouth. Something's going to come out of their mouth that's really important. That's how the kind of Hebrews and the Old Testament works and the Bible works. And I think he's saying, look, there's something heavy, serious, important coming. All these things, okay, you could say, yeah, it's Jesus talking. But all these things are all building up to us. And they're basically saying, stop, look, and listen. This is important. Jesus is going to get, as it were, bring the law from God down from the mountain to us. It's important. Okay. When you think about, I don't know if you ever read the reviews online and stuff. Why do people read reviews when they're looking for stuff? What is it about? Why do people go to reviews when they want to buy something? I mean, it's to kind of check out the stuff you want to buy, isn't it? You don't want to waste your money. But do we listen to all reviews, or maybe you have a favourite reviewer, or maybe if you're in certain subjects, you go to certain people for advice. You kind of trust the recommendations of friends. It's interesting on the Facebook group, someone's always asking for a recommendation for a plumber, or is there someone who can build my IKEA unit or decorate my bedroom? And then you get all these personal recommendations. Those are the ones that really count, aren't they? Because we're sort of being recommended there. And I think, in a sense, what Matthew's doing is saying, look, I'm recommending that you listen. Listen to Jesus. So what's the application for us? I think the application for us is if Jesus is opening his mouth, we should close our mouth. In other words, we should listen. We should listen. He's looking us in the eye and he's saying, I'm speaking. This is really important. And I guess the other thing to say is, well, you can't be neutral about this. This is all setting Jesus up as a kind of serious teacher. You can't be in the middle. You can't be on the fence. You can't be sort of, about this. Either you're going to accept it or you're going to reject it. But you can't be 50-50 about this. So he's really kind of in our face, sort of saying that, I think. Who's speaking? Jesus is speaking. Right, well, who's listening? And then you think about the passage. Who is he talking to now? Very interesting. Is he talking to the crowds or is he talking to his disciples? Because there's crowds all around him and there's crowds following him. And it says, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him and he began to teach them. Okay, so on one level you think, well, he's teaching his disciples, isn't he? The ones who are closest to him, the people who have sort of committed themselves to him. Probably, yeah. But if we were to read the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, it then says, well, perhaps Simon, you could read chapter 7 and verse 28 and 29.
When Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes.
The crowds were astonished. So I think what it is he's teaching his disciples. The Sermon on the Mount is for believers, it's for followers of Jesus, but there's a kind of invitation for anyone and everyone to kind of listen in and be challenged. I mean, later on he says he does say things like, make sure you enter into life. Well, if he's just talking to people who are already his believers, his disciples, why would he necessarily have to say things like that? He's saying, look, this is for people who want to follow me, but if you're not following me yet, come in, you can. So it's an invitation. So I think we need to say that the Sermon on the Mount is not, first of all, a kind of manifesto for how to change the world. It's not a political manifesto. It's not a social change idea. It's not about how we can make this world a better place. It's not that kind of thing. It's not like the books you get in Waterstones. Here's one: The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, which is kind of like, don't know if anyone's sort of seen it or read it. It's kind of like a collection, a sorted collection. I think, have you read it, Elaine? I'm not sure. Did you know?
I've seen it.
You've seen it.
Read it.
It's kind of like a collection of kind of feel-good quotes. So if you're feeling bad about yourself, you can read all these things and it can cheer you up. I'm probably doing it a great disservice there, but it's just like happy thoughts and and all that. Or like Jordan Peterson. He's the kind of favourite sort of author of people on the right. And he's got 12 rules for life and all this sort of stuff. Self-help. This is not like that. Because Jesus is not saying to people, look, I want you to take all this and you're going to sort of improve your lives. He's going to be saying, look, this is me sort of reaching into you, my disciples, and challenging you, yes, and changing you. But you're not going to be sort of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not a kind of manual for how to change and be a better person. It's something far more radical than that. Okay? So the question, I think, is, am I truly a disciple of Jesus? And the Sermon on the Mount is going to sort of worm its way into our thoughts, and it's going to be putting its finger on some things and saying, are you a disciple? If so, then will we see this fruit in your lives? And of course, if you're not, then Jesus is saying, choose life. Come in. All right. So who's speaking? Jesus. He's this teacher. Who's listening? Are we listening? And then the third thing to say is, well, what's he saying? And I'll just be very brief here. So you've got some questions. Sermon on the Mount is 2,000 years old. Is it relevant? Well, let me just list some of the things Jesus is going to talk about. Happiness. Having a life that other people will envy you for. That sounds quite relevant. It's about character and attitude. It's about worry and an antidote to worry. It's about anxiety. Jesus preaches about sex and about lust and about marriage and about money and about divorce and about how we speak and talk. Those sound pretty relevant, don't they? It's about how culture can be influenced. I mean, isn't that what just about everyone's banging on about? Make a change, make a difference, be an influencer, leave a legacy. Jesus talks about that. Salt, light, preserving, guiding. It's about our private and public lives and how they should match up. How many times has that been in the political debate? What goes on at home and all the rest of it. It's about honesty and so on. I could list so many more things. And at the end, the crowds were astonished. That sounds like a message that's pretty relevant. This guy's saying something incredible. They were astonished when they heard him. Sounds relevant to me. And then, okay, is it radical? You know, because it could be relevant, but it could be dull as ditch water. It could be just like everyone else is saying. It could be, yeah, very relevant, but then so is taxes and accounting. I mean, who wants to preach about that? Well, I'm sure there's some sermons on there somewhere, but yeah, tax collectors, they're in there. But do you know what I mean? Well, then listen to this. Jesus says at the end of the first chapter 5, he says, be perfect, just as your heavenly Father is perfect. Well, either we need an answer to how we can do that, or we need some way of making sure that somehow we can fulfill that. That's pretty radical, isn't it? Be perfect. What does Jesus mean by that? That's radical. Maybe that's scary, because none of us can be on our own. So Jesus is calling us to a challenge. He wants to shatter our shallowness. And I think he's looking into our hearts, and he says things like, if you look at someone lustfully, you've committed adultery. If you're angry with someone, you are a murderer in your heart. Suddenly we're kind of, whoa, this is very relevant, and it's just a bit too radical for me. But Jesus is saying these things, so we're going to have to think, what's he saying? There's a lot more we could say, but I think perhaps if you wanted just one theme for the whole sermon, you know, it would be when Jesus says, don't be like them. So he thinks about the religious and the hypocritical, those who think they're okay. And he says, don't be like them. And then he also talks about the people who don't have a faith in God, and they're worried and they're herring around trying to find food and clothes and money and all the rest of it. They're anxious, they're stressful. And he says, don't be like them. Or he thinks about people perhaps who just babble on, babble, and they think if they sort of have the right formula in their prayers, then they can make God do what they want. And he says, well, don't be like them. And all the time, Jesus is saying, the way the world does things, whether it's religious people or atheists, it's all the same. Don't be like them. I've got a radical way. So it is the only way. So hopefully that's a challenge to us as well. Radical. Right, I better wrap things up, hadn't I? The last question is, can we keep it? Now you see that little picture I've put down on the side. I'll just hold it up to the camera so you can see. There you go, all those icons on there. Little icons. Where might you see those?
Hopefully not very often on your dashboard. The car.
Yeah, hopefully not very often on your dashboard on the car. They're all warning signs, aren't they?
Yeah.
When I was a long time ago now, I went to Nigeria with a church teaching thing, and it was pitch black when we landed, and I got picked up by a friend, and he borrowed a car, and he picked us up at the airport, and he was going to drive us for about 3.5 hours to where we had to go. Pitch black, but inside his car there was a distinct smell of petrol, and the dashboard was lit up like a Christmas tree with just about all of these warning lights, right? Early morning, all dark, and it was very beautiful colours, and all these warning lights were lit up. And so off we go. No worries, it's my mate's car. They've been on for ages, those lights. Well, I got pictures of me in Nigeria, in the hot sun, broken down by the side of the road, and people coming out of the bush. One lady had a whole tray of hard-boiled eggs on her head, in an egg tray to sell. I don't know if people regularly break down there, but out she came. Why? Because we didn't listen to the lights. The lights were calling us, and my friend didn't call. So we had to call the garage and so on. And I think the picture I'm trying to get across there is, the lights, first of all, are telling us to do something. Call the garage, get the car fixed. And I think the Sermon on the Mount is like that. It's saying, you need fixing, and only God can fix you. And the Sermon on the Mount is not a list of rules that we have to keep to please God or be sort of super Christians. First of all, the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus saying, you're broken, you need fixing, only God can do it. Like all those lights on the dashboard. I think, though, the second thing is that when we're fixed, if you like, when all the lights have been turned off, or if we allow Jesus to kind of come into our heart and change us, then we can get where we're going. We can get to where we're going. So I think the second way the Sermon on the Mount can help us is it shows us that we can't do it, but at the same time, Jesus transforms us by his Holy Spirit, and he works in us in such a way that, if you like, the engine's working properly, so the car is rolling properly, so we can actually begin to live the way Jesus wants. So can we keep the Sermon on the Mount? I'm going to say yes, no, but yes. You know, what do I mean by that? I suppose the first yes, can we understand it? Yes. Is it simple preaching? Yes. Can it be applied to my life? Yes. Can I keep it by myself? No. Am I ever going to be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect? No. Am I ever going to be free of all these things that Jesus says, like, you know, if I look at someone lustfully, or if I'm angry with someone without cause? No. In the end, the sermon has to break us so it can then remake us. But then when I come to Jesus, what does the last verse say that we read today? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That, I think, is really the opening door to the whole sermon. To be poor in spirit, to be bankrupt in spirit, is to say to God, I need saving. I can't do it. I am a sinner. But to come to God like that, Jesus says, that begins opening the door to heaven. Yours is the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven is not for religious people. It's not for good people. It's for people who are bankrupt morally and spiritually. But when we get to that point, can we keep it? Well, Jesus will keep it for us. And by his Holy Spirit, he'll help us to sort of head in that direction. And all that we do will be pleasing to God. So he does it all. He gives us his life, and then we live for him. So can we keep it? Yes, sort of. No, but yes, if we come to him as those who are poor in spirit. So I hope that's a kind of overview for you, good helpful overview of the sermon. And I think we'll have a time maybe just to pray and chat. And I better turn the video off.